Hey guys, thought I'd take a quick diversion from my movie series to talk about History Maker Baseball and a little bit of a nuance I'm trying to add to my experience. And for those of us who play these games, we agree that the games are quite fun and enjoyable the way they are, but some of us with tinkering minds like to see if we can enhance it or maybe do something to make it a little bit different or more realistic as we see it in our eyes anyway. So what I've done is I've done some tinkering with the 1975 World Series set that came with the game, and I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, I was watching from Al Wilson's Hands-on Game channels when he talked about History Maker Baseball. He made a statement that was about 95% true. When he stated that in History Maker Baseball, the pitcher always gets to have a say in the at-bat. Well, on the following rolls, 133, 155, 135, 156, 245, 346, 366, 444, and 456, the pitcher does not get a say because they are blank in those results. And I kind of didn't like that. So I was thinking, what can we do to put something in there so that there's not a blank in any of the spots, and there's also a blank in the 1, 2, 3, and 1, 4, 5 of the batter column. So I decided to tinker with it and notice that in the game itself, the only left-right check is the 3, 5, 6, asking if it's the same. Well, baseball, especially in modern times, and even going back as far as the 70s, has really evolved into a managerial smorgasbord of left-right platooning and left-handed relief specialists and so forth. And so I was trying to think of a way to incorporate that into the game. So what I came up with on my own, just tinkering around with it, and I don't know if it's going to work or not. I'm just going to put it out there and then maybe do some beta testing on my own for a few games to see how often they come up, and when they do come up, how relevant they are. I came up with a category trait or a quality called Platoon. So what I did is I went through the 75 Red Sox and Reds team that came with the game, looked up on retrosheet.org at the left-right splits for all the players, and if a player had a left-right differential somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.75 or higher, then I gave them a full platoon rating. If the differential was 0.5 or less, I gave them a semi-platoon rating. In other words, if a batter hit 310 against right-handers and only 230 against lefties, that's a difference of 0.8, so they would get a full platoon. If, on the other hand, they hit 310 against right-handers and maybe 280 against lefties, that's only a 0.3, so that would garner a semi-platoon. Now, if it got down to about 0.25, I just called it even and didn't worry about it. So if we look at the player cards here, what I did, and I just wrote this in ink, I gave Dan Dreesen a full platoon. I don't have his stats in front of me, but his left-right splits, if you look it up, as Casey Stengel used to say, you can look it up. His left-right splits, I believe it's over 100-point difference. So that's why he got a full platoon. And Joe Morgan is in that 0.5 vaguely area, so I gave him a semi-platoon. And for the Red Sox, same with Dwight Evans. I know he had over 100-point difference. I think he had like over 300 against lefties and down around 230 against righties. And Yastrzemski, his differential was minor, but it was enough to warrant a semi-platoon. Now, there's also some outliers in that a right-handed batter will occasionally hit better against right-handed pitching than they do left-handed pitching. And that was the case for a couple of the players that I found. Dave Concepcion of the Reds and Rick Miller of the Red Sox. So what I did is I gave them a platoon opposite, which basically means it's the opposite of what you would normally think a platoon would be. And these are semi-platoon opposites. They weren't, the differential was around 0.5. It wasn't huge. It wasn't, but it was enough to stand out. So I gave it a platoon opposite. So basically, what that would mean is, rather than the pitcher getting the advantage against them on a platoon check, or in other words, if Dave Concepcion was facing a right-handed batter, he would get a platoon advantage the same way others would if they were facing the opposite-handed. So that's the way that went there. And then I got to thinking, okay, what can we fill in to these blank spots? What would be reasonable to put into some of these things? And so what I did is I just took my notepad out and just kind of scribbled some stuff here. And what I determined, or what I thought, and like I said, I haven't tested this yet in actual game situation. I will do that later. This is just a brainstorming activity, for lack of a better term, for those of you in the business world that when you have meetings, you talk about brainstorming. This is about what I'm doing, but it's a brainstorm of myself, and my brain's not that big, so it's not much of a storm. But I'm going to try anyway. So the 1-3-3 result, since it's a lead die of 1 in this game is generally better for the pitcher. So I'm going to go ahead and call that a strikeout if there is a platoon advantage. And that would basically just have the word platoon in replacing the 1-3-3. It would just say platoon, question mark, if so, strikeout. If not, we'd move on to the next situation and it would be slugger. So it'd be like platoon, question mark, strikeout. If not, then you go on, drive on the way you normally would. 1-3-5 I'm not going to mess with because that's the unusual results chart. And I definitely don't want to do anything to hurt that. So that I'm going to leave. I would leave that as blank so we can go straight to the unusual results chart based on what the color of the number 1 die was. 1-5-5. Still, the 1, like I said, is it's supposed to be more advantageous to the pitcher. So I'm going to call that a foul out to the catcher. And then right below it, 1-5-6. I'm going to call that a ground ball to either first or third base, your choice. I guess, if it's a left-handed hitter, it would be a ground ball to first. Right-handed hitter, ground ball to third. And with that lead die of 1, that would be a double play if there are runners on base, or at least a runner on first. All right, now the 2-2-2, now that we've got a lead die of 2, it's a little bit less advantageous to the pitcher, but still an advantage in somewhat when they get their choice and when it falls on them. So I decided 2-2-2 to call it a fly out to center. All right, now 2-4-5 is where I try to get a little more interesting. And I noticed in the back of the book they have these highlight reels that when I play this game, I hardly ever, I don't know if I've ever gotten to those. So I want to try to bring those into the forefront more often and see how it plays. So I changed the 2-4-5 into a highlight reel Y. So highlight reel Y would be the result if there was a platoon check there. That was a yes. All right, now we go to 3-3-3. And 3-3-3, actually, when I was doing my results here, I skipped 3-3-3 without even knowing about it. So I'll have to come up with 3-3-3 on the fly later on. 3-4-6, I decided that, the 1-3-5 unusual results play doesn't happen all that often, and so I wanted to incorporate the umpires just a little bit more. So I'm calling that strictly just an umpire chart. So all that would do is you would go to the umpire chart, and it would be based on how many people were on base, if anyone was on base, and so forth. So it would be strictly just an umpire chart check. The 3-6-6, now there's a 3-5-6 that came with the game. It talks about the strikeout if it's the same. Basically, it's a platoon advantage for the pitcher. It would be a strikeout. 3-6-6, I went back to the highlight reel. I'm going to do highlight reel Z. So if you get this, I'm going to try highlight reel Z and see what happens. Then we move down to 4. Now, a lead die of 4 gets more advantageous for the batter. So on a highlight reel 4, I call this a fly out to left because on a fly out, it's a sacrifice fly on any fly out because the runner, no matter if he's stoic or not, is going to score on a fly ball. And that still helps the pitcher because the 4-4-4 otherwise is either going to be a single or a double. So the pitcher would at least get an out here, and if there were 2 outs already, they would end the inning. So that gives the advantage to the pitcher a little bit more on that. 4-5-6, the results here are patient is a walk or you get a fly out to center. So I was trying to determine what to do here, and I called this one a ground ball to first. But if the first baseman is iron, there will be an error on the play, a one-base error. So that's just something I wanted to throw in there to try to throw the fielding in just a little bit more. Then there were a couple spots where the batter column was blank, 1, 2, 3, for instance. So I was trying to figure out, okay, 1, 2, 3 for the pitcher. If it's both flash and fresh, it's a strikeout. and otherwise it's a ground out to short. So I wanted something in between. So in 1, 2, 3, I call that a single to left and right field. Now 1, 4, 5 is the final one where the batter card is blank. And I noticed all the times I've been playing this game, I haven't noticed any balks. And there is a chart called balks and bogeys in the back. So I basically call 1, 4, 5. If it gets to 1, 4, 5 and the pitcher, it says struggler, it's a wild pitch. If he's not a struggler, then it's going to be a balk. So we're not even going to get to this ground out to first or third anymore if there's a platoon. If there's not a platoon, then it won't be a balk. So you can still get to this. But if the platoon advantage kicks into play here, it's going to be a balk. So in other words, if you got a right-handed pitcher facing a left-handed batter, the pitcher would balk. If it's a right-handed pitcher facing a right-handed batter, the check would be no, and you would just go to ground out to the first or third baseman. So I'm trying that just as a test case to see what would happen and if it would change the experience at all. And like I said, I've gone through the 75 set, and a lot of the players I didn't give them platoon advantages because their numbers didn't warrant it. But some players like Rico Petrocelli, I gave a semi-platoon. Let's look at Fred Lynn, I gave a semi-platoon. But, some other guys, like Pete Rose, he was a switch hitter. He really didn't have a platoon advantage. Although I did remove the stoic from his running total because there's no way in the world Pete Rose is stoic. I can't consider him stoic at all, especially when he goes to the betting booth. Then we got Ken Griffey. He was listed as a neutral runner, but he's just so fast, I had to give him a semi-active because he's going to get the extra base a lot of times, and he will steal. Cesar Geronimo was a big platoon player. And also for pinch hitting. I noticed pinch hitting is a big deal. Usually, in real-life manager decisions, when they bring in a pinch hitter, they normally, if it's a right-handed pitcher on the mound, they'll pull a left-handed pitch hitter to pinch hit. And if it's a left-handed pitcher on the mound, they'll choose a right-hander. Well, the Reds had two guys that fit that mold, Terry Crowley and Merv Retman. And I looked at their numbers, and the numbers backed it up. Terry Crowley hit over 100 points higher against right-handed pitching than they did left-handed pitching. And Merv Retman did the same thing against left-handed pitching versus right-handed pitching. So that way, later in the game, if you're managing the Reds against whoever, say the Red Sox, since that's what came with the game, suppose the Red Sox bring in Jim Burton, a lefty, you'll be penalized if you use Terry Crowley to pinch hit against Jim Burton because that would go against all baseball logic. So you would hopefully have Merv Retman available to be able to pinch hit. Then vice versa, say they brought in Dick Drago to pitch, the right-hander in the bullpen, and you would want to bring in Terry Crowley, assuming he was available to pinch hit. And if you didn't, you could still bring in Merv Retman, but he would be potentially at a disadvantage due to that platoon disadvantage. So, in other words, he has a platoon advantage, but it works against him if it's the opposite hand. So it's almost like a negative or an inverse of that. So, like I said, I'm experimenting with it to see how far this should go, if at all. And if I get to play with it and it gets to be cumbersome or just too much to deal with, then I'll just scrap it. Like a scrapper in the game, I'll scrap it. But if it turns out to be something that's interesting, then hey, who knows? So we'll give it a shot here. I'm going to try one test case real quick. It's just to give you an example of what might happen in this kind of game. And I'll get the dice and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we've got an example at bat here. We got Carl Yastrzemski, who has the semi-platoon rating against Pedro Bourbon. The roll is a 366. So 366 is one of the blank ones where we check the platoon characteristic. He's a semi-platoon. Decider die says he's not a platoon player, so therefore we skip that check and go straight over to the next check. Pinch hitter, no, so he would fly out to center. All right, let's change this over and make it a decider die roll. 366, he is a platoon, so 366 says highlight reel Z. So we go to the back of the book in highlight reel Z, and then we're going to roll the 2 dice plus the decider, and that's a 1-3. 1-3 says batter suffers career-ending injury after being struck by pitch. Game pause while batter tended to. So that's a little extreme, but Some of the other roles aren't quite so demanding. Let's try the next one. 5-5. 5-5 says infielder mistakenly thinks routine put out is third out, tosses ball in the outfield, and trots to dugout. Runners advance one base. That's certainly something that could be doable. And this career under injury is a little bit extreme, but hey, that's what Highlight Reel Z is all about. So that's just an example of something that could be done with this game. And just to give it some thought, and like I said, I'll actually go through a game eventually here. Now I record it. I'll just play the game maybe and give some highlights of the results. But and actually, I'll have to play more than one game, obviously, because anytime you're doing statistical checks, the number one quality is the sample size. So the larger the sample size, the more accurate the determination. So can't really play this one game and then say, okay, well, it's either good or bad. But after a couple games, I think that it would start to become evident. Now, I do have the 2015 set that I got from History Maker Baseball downloaded mid-season, and I did go through a lot of the teams and mark the platoon rating or non-platoon rating for those players. So I can always, use more of a sample case rather than just the Reds and the Red Sox. But anyway, that's just my take on that. And, people who play this game and love it are probably sitting there scratching their head saying, why in the world do you want to mess with something that's so brilliant? Well, I mean, if the way I look at it, if you're not trying to improve, you're losing ground. So I always like to try to tinker with things if I can, if I think they need to be tinkered with. And my only beef with the History Maker Baseball game was the left-right splits, because everything else on there I really enjoy. I just don't think it captures the right-left advantage all that much. Just have that one roll there, and I don't think it really comes up enough to warrant it. Otherwise, you might as well just have all right-handed relievers, and there's no need for a lefty reliever because it wouldn't come up in the game. So just my opinion, and people are probably going to disagree with me on that, and that's fine. That's the beauty of the game, is that we have our own opinions and what we like and what we think is realistic, and I'm just going to try it, and hey, if it turns out to be something that really is not important or is a waste, then I'll just trash it and forget about it. But I just thought I would put that out there, see if anything stuck, and if it does work, then I will certainly put out more about it, and I can, to save anybody else the legwork of looking up all these stats that I've already looked up for you, I'd be more than happy to either send you a PDF or an email or Excel sheet or something of the different players and who has the strong platoon and who doesn't. But anyway, that's it from here. Just thought I would do something different to kind of fill in the gap between my weekly movie series. And that's about it. It's a Saturday morning. I'm just kind of relaxing. I'm actually going to go out and enjoy the day because it's going to be 65 degrees today. We're having this warm spell here on February I believe it's the 20th. So I'm enjoying it. It's unseasonably warm. So I'm going to go out and take advantage of that. Maybe do some work in the yard, and then maybe later tonight tinker with this some more, while I also play my other games, Payoff Pitch and Stratomatic. So that's it from here. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch you later.